In the 1960s, the rate, federal revenue sharing, federal money that went into the states was almost 13%. And it's easier to read up here. By 2005, it's up to 42%. Guess what percentage it is in Georgia today? Anybody have a guess? Okay. This was FY14, last year. Total budget 41.6. You probably had politicians in here telling you it was like 21 billion. Because the federal share is another 21 billion. Okay?
Why do you think they call it deal?
Very good. 51.9% in 2014. And I have a map, I didn't put it up here. But what it shows is states that are donors and states that are beneficiaries, people that get more money back than they put in. Georgia is a beneficiary state, as are many red states. That's the hook. That's the hook that the federal government has on red states, okay? Our state legislature is bought off. Okay, so again, we talk about checks and balances. Madison said the proposed government, which he's talking about the federal government, cannot be deemed a national one since its jurisdiction extends to certain enumerated objects only, the delegated powers, right, the enumerated powers, and leaves to the several states a residuary, inviolable sovereignty over all other objects. In other words, if it's not delegated to the federal government, it belongs to the states, okay? So you have checks and balances, okay? There is the federal government, and on the other side you have the states. Now it's balanced. Federal government has its certain specific limited powers, and the states have all the other powers. But what happens? The legislature, the U.S. Congress, gives away its legislative power to the executive by establishing agencies that can create regulations with the force of law. Dozens of them that are not found, the activities of which are not found under Article 1, Section 8, the enumerated powers. So what does that do? That unbalances the equation. The states now are subject to the regulations of these federal unconstitutional agencies. So instead of having a federal government, where you have the federal government on one side, the state governments on the other side, what we have is a unitary structure. The federal government is supreme, and the states are the administrative sub-bodies, if you will, of the national government, which is precisely the form of government they had in the Soviet Union. That's where we are today. And Thomas Jefferson said, when all government and little and great things shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all powers, it will render powerless the checks provided of one government on another, and will become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated. "1913 was a seminal year for us in the United States. This is Woodrow Wilson is president. Woodrow Wilson was the second progressive president after Theodore Roosevelt. He had open contempt for the founders and for the Constitution. He did not feel that the Constitution, the government under the Constitution, was suited for the quote-unquote modern era of that day, with industrialization and so on and so forth, and that they needed to have a great blackout. You know what? I think we lost power. It'll take a minute for it to come back up again. Under Wilson, we got the income tax. We got the Federal Reserve. You know, the Federal Reserve, that's this bank that prints money out of thin air and charges us interest for it and manipulates the rates so that it squeezes the money out of our pocket. It alternately lets us get some and it squeezes us out, right? We had the direct election of senators, which I'll talk more about. Once and if I ever get the slides back up again. It's coming. It's coming. So it was a departure. It was a year of departure. It was interesting to me also that Wilson, when he was re-elected, he had promised that we were not going to get into World War I. Can anybody tell me why we got into World War I?
Money.
Yeah, who said money? Yeah, right. I think, well, there was a slogan though, you know, to save the world for democracy or something like that.
I like my answer better.
Yeah, I like your answer a whole lot better. Well, that's coming up. I'm going to tell you another story about my days in Kentucky and working in the government there. We had a bill there called Strippin Bill. Anybody have any idea what a stripper bill might be? Anybody ever raised on a tobacco farm? It has nothing to do with stripping tobacco. What it has to do is every now and then, you know, back in those days we had the solid South. Everybody in the South voted Democrat, right? Except there were always a few Republicans. So what happened is that sometimes the Democrats wouldn't show up at a general election and there would be a Republican elected governor. And so the legislature, which met every 2 years, still does, for 3 months, would pass legislation over the veto of the governor that would strip the governor of his powers. In those days, the Kentucky governor could only serve 1 term without sitting out a term. Today they can do 2 terms in a row. So what would happen is by the time he would fight it in court, his term was over. So he was stripped of his powers. Another little gimmick that I had to catch on to was a thing called a transom bill. I wonder what in the world is a transom bill? What?
Windows?
Yeah, a transom is a window. That's right. That's right. What it was? There was the old Southern Hotel was downtown Frankfort, and that's where the legislators used to stay. Most of them anyway. And so the lobbyists would come into the hotel, and if they had a bill they wanted passed, they'd wrap up some money in the bill, okay, with a rubber band, and they'd throw them through the transoms, okay, those transom bills.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, we're back up again. Thank you, Field. All right.
Job security.
All right, so when the Congress created the Fed, what they were doing was giving away one of the powers and one of the duties, one of the responsibilities it has. Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 4, it gives Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. They gave it to a private, independent bank that we have yet to audit. As I said, the income tax, direct election of senators, the administrative state, where they began exploding federal agencies, and the military was segregated. I don't know if you all knew that or not, but prior to World War I, military was not segregated. The next thing that undermines our rule of law is the living Constitution. Y'all heard of that?
Yeah.
Which is the Constitution is interpreted to mean what a majority on the Supreme Court agrees it should mean. Not what the words say, not what the framers of the Constitution expounded in the deliberations, or what they said in the Federalist Papers, or what were said in the ratifying conventions, but what 5 judges on the Supreme Court think it ought to say. They can turn and have turned our rights completely on their head.
Yep.
Congress shall make no law respecting establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Wow. Or speech and so on. And our Supreme Court has absolutely turned those things on their head. And people that don't know that, I know you all know that, but you need to tell people who are sitting on the couch and get them out of their chair.
I want to throw something in there. Most people don't know that the Georgia Constitution has its own Bill of Rights. How many people knew that? Okay. And there's provisions in there that are very similar to the U.S. Constitution, it's particularly for freedom of religion. And there's a big debate going on in Georgia now about the religious freedom bill that they brought up. I think we have to be very careful, though, that there's a lot of bills being brought before us that have certain phraseology in there that we need to understand what it means. And there's a phrase called compelling government interest. When the founders created the Constitution, there was this move by some states, they wanted the Bill of Rights to enumerate our rights. There were others that did not want to do that. They said if you enumerate it, then it could be regulated at some point. There's the others on the side, well, we are natural rights. We don't have to say what they are, they're just ours. Well, they were enumerated, that's the Bill of Rights. So that's what's happening now today. They've been enumerated, and now they're, one by one, they're incrementally taking them away from us.
Precisely. So now, with the disintegration of federalization, the federal government says that it is the sole and final judge of constitutionality. If you think that a funny window came up, well, what's the remedy when the Supreme Court gets it wrong? Oh, you got to go to the Supreme Court.
Revolution.
What is the remedy?
Ignore it.
What's the remedy when all three branches of the federal government, as they are today, disobey the Constitution? What remedy is there? What remedy does the federal government recognize?
None. Article 5.
None.
Absolutely none. Okay, they don't. So what does that mean? That means we have to take our power back.
That's right.
We have to have enough voices that those people in Washington and down under the Gold Dome know that they're not going to be there if they don't listen to us and do what we want. As long as they think they can get away with it, have their office, have their perks, have their money, have their inside deals, they're going to keep on doing what they're doing. And that is squeezing small business and the middle class. Now, we've all heard that the United States now is the most heavily taxed on business in the world, right? I remember when Japan was supposed to be, I was doing business in Japan, and a company I was with, a textile company here in Georgia, we had a manufacturing plant down near Osaka, and there was a 60% tax rate there, but nobody paid it. That was a joke. We were still, at that time, the United States was still the highest taxed in the world. But what we have to recognize is that it's just the small, quote-unquote, small businesses, the giant corporations. Can you all see that chart? This is what giant corporations like General Electric, they're not only not paying taxes, they're getting money back. They're getting money from us. And so are these others right here. So it's the squeeze is on small private businesses and on the middle class. Look what's happening to our standard of living. Our standard of living, our household income has declined some 40% since the early 2000s. And we're lowering expectations. Young people graduate from college today with a degree in whatever it is they get a degree in, underwater basket weaving or whatever, and their chances of getting a job in their field, unless it's a high-tech field, are relatively slim. There's many more of them unemployed, many of them underemployed. And this is all a direct result of government policies, tax policies, regulation policies, and interference in places where they are not allowed to be. So the Constitution has been subverted. This is kind of a summary here. All three branches of the federal government disobey the Constitution. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
The federal government claims supremacy in all matters, and that's illegitimate. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
The federal government claims exclusive power to determine the limits of its own power. The rule of law has been replaced by the rule of man. You agree with that? These are the things we need to tell people. Traditional American culture is being intentionally undermined. Free market economy is being replaced with centrally planned and controlled economy. from Washington, D.C. Or is it Moscow? Government is serving the power elite. Oh, it's a representative government, all right, if you're represented on K Street. And our standard of living is being reduced. Our God-given rights are restricted or stripped away. These are all the things that are happening right now. For many people, they don't see this. Because it's just like that picture I showed up front, you know, the house sitting on the cliff where it was being undermined. Well, you know, it's just still sitting there, right? But it's going to take maybe one more wave or another wave and boom, down it goes. That's where we are right now. They're tightening the noose. All the legal precedents, all the legal structure that's necessary to put a noose around our necks are in place right now. All they need to do is pull it tight. And we have got to resist while we still can. We've got to demand fidelity to the oath of office. When you took that oath of office, Madam Senator or Mr. Representative, you swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, did you not? Did you think that it was just ceremonial? Or did you really mean that from your heart? What does it mean to you? We expect you to stand by that. When things come across your desk that are clearly unconstitutional to even someone like me who's not a constitutional attorney, you need to turn away from it. You need to fight it. You need to defend the Constitution. We want a restoration of federalism, which means that Georgia and the other states have got to become fiscally independent. We got to get off of the federal bottle. And we want the Constitution interpreted based on the meaning of the words as expounded by the framers and the people who ratified it. That's what we want. That's the message that we need to deliver. That's the message we want to tell our friends that are now sitting on the couch but are of like mind with us. Tell your senator that. Tell your representative that. Tell your people on your city council that, on your county commission that. And that's my end of the program. Back to you, Phil.
Good job. And it wasn't a few old men that ratified the Constitution. It's been ratified over and over and over again with 1.5 million plus lives of the last 200 years. We cannot forget that. We have men and women that have given their lives for that Constitution, that believed it, and they died for it. So it's not just a bunch of old men who, in fact, were not that old back that time, 200 years ago. So how are we going to do this? Folks, we got to get people engaged. It's time. And when are we going to do it? Now's the time. And who's going to do it? It's got to be us. So the key is we. We've started a whole brand new initiative, as Richard was telling you.
Stand this way so you don't block the street. There you go.
Restore and preserve the Constitution. And I'm going to show you a little taste of what this is going to look like. So, as I said in the beginning, our goal is to find people in every county of the state that are going to reach out to their local community and participate in this effort to get more people engaged. Go talk to civic groups, talk to veterans groups, schools, churches, whoever will listen. This is not a partisan issue. This is not about left or right, Republican or Democrat. This is about following the rule of law and having self-government. A lot of feedback over on this side.
Yeah, there you go.
That'd be over here is better.
Yeah.
So, I got to give Kim a big hand in this. She's been working very hard. This is our new website. It's not public yet, but it will be soon. But this is going to be the resource hub for all of our partners that come in and get involved with us in this network. We're going to have articles there on things we're talking about that are effective, that are issues that are relevant to Georgia, as well as issues relative to the national as well. So the goal is, at the federal level, is to keep the federal in a holding action. We've been trying to make them listen to us. We need to still keep trying to do that. But we're not going to get any change until we get some grassroots, some new people involved in the legislature at the federal level. And the founders believed that the government closest to home was the best. And it starts with your local government. It starts with your county commission and your city council. Because eventually those people are going to be your state legislators, and eventually they're going to be at the federal level. So we have to get people engaged in this whole process of self-government and being involved at the local level. We want the federal legislators to honor their oath of office. We have to demand that, and if they won't, we have to remove them, no matter what party they belong to. At the state level, we need to get our state legislators to honor their oath. They pledged an oath to the U.S. Constitution as well as the state constitution, and we need to get them to abide by that and follow their oath of office. And the key thing there, as Richard was saying earlier, is to restore federalism. Right now, our Georgia budget, the Georgia Constitution says we have to have a balanced budget. Well, it's not really balanced, is it? Not when you get $21 billion from the federal government, and the only part you have to balance is the other 20. No, we're beholden to the federal government. Every state is, and we have to turn that around. We can't afford it. We have to restore fiscal independence and resist these unconstitutional acts. You've heard me talk about Agenda 21, regionalism, and how federal grants, money from the federal government is influencing our local policies. It's influencing our local property rights, our zoning laws. This federal money coming in is all the way down to the lowest level. Just to give you some examples, sometimes we feel like it's just overwhelming. We've been trying, and we're not making any difference. Well, we have made a difference, and some of you in this room have helped with that. Let me give you a few examples. The first one is T-Splost. Back in 2012, there was a grassroots movement to fight a new tax in Georgia. And we got people all over the state, grassroots. We raised about $25,000 with our group, the Transportation Leadership Coalition, against an $8 million juggernaut of advertising and media promotion of this T-Splost tax. Fortunately, it was defeated in 9 out of 12 counties. 9 out of 12 regions. But what did the legislature do? This past session, they come right back around with another angle, and they ram it down our throats at the very last minute. Remember how that happened? But we can have an effect, and we did have an effect in 2012 when we defeated that. That was a major blow to the power elite. I mean, they were shocked when that happened. Let me give you another example closer to home. Habersham County, just a little ways up the road here. A gentleman came to us during the whole T-Splost debate, and he said, "Have you guys heard anything about property maintenance codes?" And we hadn't, and he said, "Well, I went to the county commission meeting, and they're getting ready to pass these property maintenance codes." I was like one of 5 people there. And he says, I started reading them and reviewing them and found out that these are a serious threat to our property rights. They were going to determine how size and locations of bedrooms, of windows, and even had provisions in there that said if you had a piece of land in the rural part of the county, you had to have a minimum of 30 acres to build a single family home. And you can imagine if you had invested in land up there, maybe 10 or 20 acres, thinking you're going to build a house, and come to find out these rules have been passed, you couldn't do anything with that property. Your property values would be taken. Well, let me tell you the power of citizen activism. This gentleman went out and started talking to his neighbors, talked to some other people in Habersham County, and at the next county commission meeting, there were 150 people there. He didn't even have to speak. The other 150 people got up and spoke, and they were able to get that whole measure defeated 5-0. All the county commissioners voted against it. That's the power of being engaged as a citizen at the local level. And we can do it. We just need to, inform our neighbors what's happening. And maybe you can't go to every county commission meeting, but maybe in your subdivision you say, look, we got to at least one of us go every week so we know what's going on and report back to the rest of us so we can be involved and know when we need to be down there and push back. During this current legislative session, there were 3 or 4 bills, I believe, that were going to implement or basically allow no-knock warrants in the state of Georgia. Does anybody know what a no-knock warrant is?
Not a warrant at all.
It's not a warrant. It's actually been illegal for over 200 years. They're not allowed in Georgia. You can't just go bust someone's door down. Look what happened to the little kid in Haversham. They threw the smoke grenade and it landed into his face and his crib. He's been mangled up. So they were trying to pass laws in Georgia that were going to make this legal. They said we have to do this so that we can make it legal and so we can monitor it and so we can have better reporting and recording of what they're doing. The problem is they were just going to give law enforcement the sovereign immunity they needed to not be prosecuted for it. Right now, there's a civil lawsuit going on in the case in Haversham County. There was another case down in Middle Georgia where a gentleman reported a burglary in his home. And it did happen, I think, a couple times. He reported it. They caught the guy, and the guy said that, well, the guy had drugs in his home. So in the middle of the night, they don't just knock on the door, they come to bust his door down. He gets up thinking, the burglars are back. He goes to the door to see what's going on, and the police shoot him. Another example of a no-knock warrant where someone's life was lost. Now, they have a legal recourse there. But if this laws had passed, the no-knock warrant laws had passed, they would do away with that legal recourse against law enforcement that does these no-knock warrants. They're still being done. They do it through, they find a judge that will sign the warrant. So because people got engaged, citizens like yourselves and others around the state, we got engaged, we were able to get those things pushed back, and they weren't passed in the state legislature. But I promise you, they will be back with them again next season. So we have to be vigilant and stay on. And another example, this was right there at the last minute in the closing of the session, SB 127. And what this bill was going to do was require anyone that paid for, there was like they considered you paid lobbyist if you paid for any kind of website, for a hosting or any kind of thing that you had like a blog. So if you were like reporting on what the state legislature is doing, you'd have to be registered as a lobbyist with the State Ethics Commission. Even if you have a radio station. If you had donors, you'd have to report your donors to the State Ethics Commission. Okay, even an individual that didn't have any donors, that just paid for a website, you have to register with the Ethics Commission. This was actually defeated as well. We got the word out through the email networks, and there must have been tens of thousands of emails going out that 2 or 3 days there all over the state. And again, that was another example where citizen activism can make a difference. So the strategy is with Restore and Preserve is we want to have an annual state meeting at the start of the legislative session to get people engaged, to get people focused on what's happening at the state capitol. We want to have a consistent and concise, coordinated message. That doesn't mean we're going to tell you what to do. You still have your autonomy to do your own thing, but we want to have a consistent message that's coming from a solid group that's represented from every county in the state. You jump in here if I need to say something different. Okay. But we're going to basically be lobbyists at the Capitol and have leadership that's from all 159 counties. That's going to be powerful when you have 1 to 10 to 50 people from every county calling, emailing, and faxing their state legislator. So it's boots on the ground in every county.
Well, we got James here. Why don't we let him talk about the survey when you're ready?
Yeah. Well, I was going to bring that up. Let me bring that up next. I think that's the next slide here. So what we're looking from you people is to find people that are committed to inform others of the threats to our liberties, our culture, and our economic well-being. Motivate people to lobby and to vote, to stand up for our rights. Participate in our weekly surveys. It'll be probably weekly during the session, but at least monthly during the rest of the year, right? Become campaign participants. So why don't I bring James up and have him talk a little bit about the weekly enumerator and the idea behind that.
Thanks, Phil.
I'm going to pass the sign-up sheet around.
Okay. My name's James Strawn, and I wouldn't expect him to speak, so I'm not really prepared for this. But as Phil said, what we intend to do is to create a weekly survey, and I would like to kick that off ahead of the session by at least 90 days. And so the idea is is to get feedback from at least one representative, or one survey respondent, I should say, in each of the 159 counties, and that then begins to give us a real voice. And also to seek surveys to be completed by the assembly, the legislature itself, people of the legislature itself. But the general idea, again, is that we'll use this weekly newspaper, which we're calling the Weekly Enumerator. This will be delivered to the it's one page is what we intend. We may do some extensions during the legislative session itself in order to cover special topics. But the general idea, again, is to give a set of graphics that explain to the legislator what the opinion is on specific topics. And again, we'll begin to gather those issues and topics ahead of the session so that by the time the session starts, we'll be able to deliver once a week to the legislature what each of the 159 counties thinks, and so what the general sentiment is in the population. And so what we're looking for really is for people to hold up their hand to be a respondent to this survey. And it's pretty simple really, because all we're asking you to do typically is to answer a yes or no question about an issue or point of policy, and then to explain in one brief paragraph why you feel the way you feel about that. And again, so we're here in Gwinnett County now, and we'd be looking for one person from Gwinnett. We'd like to have multiple people. We'd love to have 159 from each county, but we're looking for a minimum of one. So the other thing that we're looking for is if you know somebody in Twiggs County, or you know somebody in Bibb or in Wilcox, or down on the coast in Glenn County or Chatham, if you know somebody that you think would be a good respondent, that would be reliable to do this once a week, and that is connected to their county and their community, that's the kind of person we're looking for. So I think Richard is circulating a sheet there, and anybody that's interested in either receiving information from us or again, hopefully in being a respondent to the survey, please let us know, and we'll be glad to get you engaged and give you a direct voice with the assembly here in Georgia. So,
Great, thanks for explaining that. We plan to have a speakers bureau that'll be able to go out to speak at different groups, and we're also looking for speakers that want to deliver this presentation we're giving today, maybe a little more concise without so much ad-lib that we've done, but we're still fine-tuning our message. We're trying to perfect it. We want to have something that's repeatable, that we can have individuals that are comfortable speaking to go into their community and talk to their churches, VFW groups, whatever it might be, to explain our message. So what we're asking is, to be effective, we ask you to be a part of the solution, and we can do it. And our slogan is, the key is we. We've got that domain name reserved, and we'll be probably using that as our brand. Hopefully, we have buttons now that we have available. We vote. The WE is like we, the people in the Constitution. And you might see the alliteration with Weekly Enumerator, WE. So we're trying to make people realize that the people are the sovereign. We are the government. We have to take it back and bring it back under our control, not the control of the power elite. So that's about the conclusion of it, right? Is there more here?
That's it?
Oh, this is our, we have the website, restoreandpreservetheconstitution.com. We have a Facebook page now, and also a Twitter account, Preserve the Law. So we're just asking you to be engaged and be a part of our network. We really appreciate all of you being here tonight. And if you have some questions for us, we'll be glad to take those and try to answer them.
can you explain the quick response code, since if they have a
Yes,
card from your...
you see there's a little square box there. It's a quick response code. If you have a smartphone, most of you have an application on the smartphone where you take a picture of that, and it will bring you to the website where you can sign up. So
Little cards back on the table.
there's cards back on the table. And we also have some books and materials. I always like to, whenever I speak, to make materials available to further your education. We have the 5,000 Year Leap. You all familiar with that? We have The Law by Frederick Bastiat. We also have Sovereign Duty, written by Chris Ann Hall. I think she spoke here a few months back. I don't know if you had a chance to read that book, but that's fantastic. But all three of those are really good sources of information. And we also have some little buttons. If you'd like to pick up a button, they're like $2 a piece. So,
Thank
Thank
our hosts.
and Steve, Dave, thank you very much.
Thank you.